Hello and welcome back to the Google Workspace Update podcast from Strawberry 7. My name is Adam.
And my name is Adam.
We're here every week to bring you the latest updates happening around the world of Google Workspace. This podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7.
Coming up on the show today,
we have a really packed show for you today. This is going to be quite a long show because we have 11 updates for you today, and some of them are quite complex. So I'll run through what we've got an update for today. First of all, we have an update to Google Meet, Docs and Gmail, Search, Chat, Approvals, Sites, Classroom, haven't seen one of those for a while, Drive and Chat. So those are the updates that we've got. Now, as always, there is a link in the podcast or the video description to the document that we read from. This contains more detailed information, it contains relevant links, and it contains some lovely pictures and moving graphics showing you these features in action. So, let's get to it.
on with the show. Right, so first up, we've got a couple of little updatelets, so these ones should be quite quick. First up is to do with Google Meet. So Google Meet hardware Chrome OS M103. So on April the 10th, Chrome OS M103 will land in the stable release channel. This includes performance and stability improvements, security patchments and key updates, such as the kernel version has been revised to 5.4 for GMH compute devices. The Serial 1 audio bar firmware was upgraded. The Series 1 touch controller has stability improvements and also a re-enablement of the Logitech Rally Bar firmware update screen. Plus more, because the Rally Bar firmware has been re-enabled, that kind of suggests it was disabled at some point for some reason. But going forward, Google will share Chrome OS updates as they're available in their weekly recap, so that we may see more Chrome OS updates in this podcast. This is available for Google Workspace customers on supported GMH compute units. Note that Series 1 Desk 27 and Series 1 Board 65 devices will update to M103 at a future date, and we'll let you know when that will be.
Great, that's fantastic, Adam. Thank you. We've talked about these sort of updates to the hardware in the past, haven't we? And it's nice to see that Google are carrying on announcing that for any of our listeners who do use those hardware devices for Google Meet. Just for anybody who listened to our previous podcast where Adam and I were kind of floundering a little bit with these hardware devices because we don't have them in use in our environments. I actually had a look into these hardware devices, and I don't know if you had a look at them as well, but these are actually completely kind of isolated devices whereby everything's just built in. Everything's kind of built into the device, and you can pop it up. It indeed does have a type of computer built into it. It connects to your wireless, and it's a single standalone device that has Google Meet all built into it. Hence these updates where it's updating kind of an OS built into that actual device itself. So very interesting devices. When Adam and I looked at them, we were a bit surprised at the cost. They were
They don't come cheap.
They were very expensive.
Although, to be fair, that model that we were looking at, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I don't think that was the same as this one. So no. Maybe there's probably a price difference somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and you are quite right to point that out. And we were right in our thinking as well that the little device that we were using in the classrooms during the pandemic that we were finding very difficult to get hold of, it was actually the same manufacturer, just a much, much smaller, more simple device that didn't have Google Meet built into it like these devices do, but was a much more basic hardware device. So nice to see it going to be in the weekly recaps there, and relevant for anybody who's using those devices to see some of the tweaks there. Thank you very much. What have we got next, please?
Right, next up is our second little update, which is for Google Docs and Gmail. So, expanding language support for grammar suggestions. So, grammar suggestions in Google Docs and Gmail are now available in more languages, which includes Danish, Dutch, Norwegian, and Swedish, so the Scandinavian countries. Language will be detected automatically, and you'll see applicable grammar suggestions, helping you write faster, more accurately, and with more confidence. Rollout and rapid release and scheduled release is complete for Google Docs, and rolling out to rapid release and scheduled release right now for Gmail.
That's wonderful. Well, for anybody listening who's got colleagues or clients in any of those Scandinavian countries, that would be a really nice update to see that. I don't want to dwell on that too much because it's pretty self-explanatory and we've got tons to get through. So thank you very much, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next, cloud search. So improve search results with personalization boost and click boost for cloud search. To help you find relevant documents faster, Google is introducing user personalization boost and click boost for the cloud search API. These boosts tailor search results based on the way users interact with search results, such as documents and have been clicked on by a user in the past, or clicked on by other users for similar queries, and they will rank higher in search results.
It's an interesting update, this. I obviously Google are king of searches, right? So I have no doubt that they know what's best for these types of things. But I am always slightly sceptical of these types of... We're almost drifting into a machine learning type aspect here of suggested searches and things like that. I know it's not strictly that, but for the sake of ease of example, we could say it's almost sort of learning what is the correct, or what it thinks is the correct result. The slight problem I've always got with these things is it doesn't seem to ever necessarily account for the human factor, which is that humans make mistakes. And if a document is ranking higher in the search results, it can have in my opinion, it can have an unexpected effect of a false positive. And what I mean by that is people will click on it thinking it's the document that they want.
Realise it's not the document that they want, then instantly go back and then continue their search.
Exactly. And meanwhile, the algorithm goes, oh my God, this document's so popular. And it's... So in a basic sense, I'll give you a basic sense. Let's say, for some reason, that you've got a SOP on your system and you've got two SOPs. You've got a SOP that is the old one and a SOP that's the updated one. And for some reason, you need to keep the old one on the system, but you've put after it do not use or something like that. If you're searching and one person is kind of used to seeing the old name maybe or something like that, clicks on the do not use one, suddenly the algorithm straight away is going to go, oh, that's a little bit more popular, and it's going to put it at the top. And unless the subsequent people looking at it are really going to notice the do not use, they're going to continue to click on it as well. And the algorithm's going to go, oh my God, this is the most popular document, so I'll keep putting it to the top. Whereas it isn't, or it shouldn't be, because it's the old version, the do not use version. I don't know if the systems are clever enough to do this. Maybe with suggested search or Google's experience of suggested search, maybe they do look into this more. But what would be great is if what you alluded to, Adam, where it looked a little bit more at the rest of the journey. So rather than
such
just
as how long somebody spends on the document. If they're only on it for 10 seconds, then that kind of suggests that maybe it was like a misclick, or it's not this is not the document you're looking for. So then they go back, and if they spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes on this other document, that is probably the actually more popular one.
Exactly. I completely agree with you, Adam. And what the way I would design it, if I was designing it, is exactly as you've described. If it was under sort of a threshold of about 10 seconds or so, I just wouldn't have the algorithm register it as a click, if that makes sense, so that it was as fair as possible. Because sometimes people are just going to go into a document briefly, but it would be good if it didn't register it. Maybe somebody listening knows a lot about how these APIs work and how the sort of more in-depth area of the code there. It'd be very interesting to hear back from any of you. If any of you do know that, please drop it in the reviews for the podcast or send us an email, info@strawberry7.com, or put it in the description of the video. We always like to hear from our listeners. So that would be interesting to know that. But nevertheless, good update and a logical kind of next step coming from Google, who are kind of the king of search in that regard. When can we get started with this, Adam? Or rather, how can we get started with this? Sorry.
Okay, so for admins and developers, the feature is available by default. There's also a guide that I've linked in our documents that you can use to learn more about the use of personalization boost and click boost in cloud search ranking. For the end users, there's no action required, but when it has been configured by your admin, you'll automatically see more personalized relevant search results. This feature is available now, so it's already been rolled out, and but this feature is available to Google Cloud Search customers only.
Okay, no problem. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Lovely. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Right, up next we have our first Google Chat update. There's a few more to come, but this is the first one. So, enabling organizational communication with announcements in Google Chat. So, Google recently announced new capabilities for space managers to ensure effective conversations within Google Chat. To build upon these features, Google is now giving space managers the ability to configure spaces for sharing organizational announcements. Using the new announcement only configuration, message posting and other capabilities are limited to designated space managers who can do things such as create a space with restricted post settings, post, reply in thread, add files, designate another member as a space manager, and modify the space settings. A space must be configured as announcement only during initial setup by clicking only space managers can post. However, at any time, an existing space manager can assign the role of space manager to another space manager, allowing them to post messages and perform other tasks as noted.
Could you say Space Manager one more time, please, Adam? I don't think it was quite enough in that update. No, that's wonderful, Adam. Thank you. I think this is a really nice little feature. I think it's just an easy way to make... I think you could probably do this before if you sort of customise the settings a little bit, but it's really easy... it's really nice to see an easy way for people to be able to create this type of space in chat. And I think for those larger do you know what? Even smaller organisations, I think this is a great feature to be able to post those announcements that the company's making or changes that need to be made or anything like that. I can imagine us using this even in a really basic sense of if we needed to move our team meeting, for example, which we do sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Or it can essentially be your bulletin board for your organisation or for wherever you're working, just to say, by heads up, this is what's going on this week or something like that. So it's not something that, it doesn't require a conversation or any reply. It's just an announcement to everybody within your organisation. The one thing that I don't love about this, I do like this update, but the one thing I do not love, and I've seen it before, is that this setting must be applied when the space is very first set up. So you cannot apply it to an existing space. Whereas if establishments are already kind of ingrained with using spaces within Google Chat, then maybe they don't want to just delete their entire space that they already have to then create a new one to enable this feature. So I would love it if you did have the option to apply this to a space that was already in use.
Yeah, I think that's a really good catch, Adam, and I think that's a really good point. I was actually in my head thinking the similar thing when you said about how when it did say you have to do this when you first set it up, I kind of had the same thought in my head. I thought, oh, okay, so you can't do it later. So I think that's a really good catch you've made there, Adam, and a very good point for people who are maybe, like you say, using those spaces already in a similar way. Okay, I think there's a bit here about why you would use it. I think we can probably work that out on our own, but let's see what Google have to say anyway.
Announcements facilitate one-way controlled communication in Google Chat. This can be important in a variety of scenarios, such as using a space for a bulletin board, like updates, rather than a resource for conversation. So that's basically what we just said. Also, Google is moving the allow people outside of your organisation to join to the advanced section of the space creation settings. So that setting is moving slightly. Also, to get started with this for the admins, there's no admin control for this feature, but if you would like to learn more about optimizing chat spaces for your organisation, I've added a link in our trusted documents. For the end users, Upon creating a space, you can navigate to the advanced settings and select the Only Space Managers Can Post option. You cannot modify the setting to restrict posting to space managers after a space is created. I really curious. I want to know why that is. What is the barrier, or what is the restriction? Why you can't do that? If you are not a space manager, the following will appear in the chat text bar, which is, it will literally just say posting is limited to space managers. So that's a really just a handy, quick visual reminder. So if you're trying to post something and you can't, then it says that you need to be a space manager. So that's quite handy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got some links here going to the help centre, haven't you, to learn a bit more about how to sort of the role as a space manager and things. So thank you for including those, Adam. I've got my own theory about why you can't change it afterwards. I think it creates a paradox inside the chat or inside the space that will break Google, because I mean, I don't know how it's coded, but I imagine that the reason you can't change it afterwards is because if you've got a space where loads of people have already posted and then you change your permissions to only space managers can post, I imagine it's kind of going to cause a bit of a problem there. That's my guess.
It might, in some way, kind of lock the data that was already there. So, for example, if that person was deleted as a user, or if you're trying to restore a backup or something like that, because that information is kind of locked, then it's a bit difficult to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've kind of alluded to something that Google could possibly do in the future to make this, you know, if they wanted to be really clever. Again, I don't know the details of the coding here, so I'm just sort of speaking hypothetically. But what they could possibly do is, in the background, when you make that change to only space managers can post, what they could do in the background is essentially move that previous space, chat history, into another kind of hidden space that still has the same permissions, but is kind of, like you say, sort of locked away. And then almost start a new chat space with the new space manager only permissions, but you as an end user, you kind of see the two together still. You don't notice any change. That would be my hypothesis about how they could sort of do that.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking, I don't really use social media, but my understanding is that on social media, if you use such things, then you'd often have the option to just turn comments off at a will, and then turn them on again at a will. So I was expecting it to be a bit more like that, whereas it's almost like a light switch. You can just flick it off and on as you like. But yeah, as we've said, then it's not quite as simple as that. And so if you do want your space to be set up in this way, then it does have to be set up upon creation.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good point. When are we going to start to see the rollout here? I think this is broken a little bit in between web and mobile, isn't it?
Yeah, so the rollout on the web, rapid release, there's a gradual rollout. For anyone that's wondering, a gradual rollout does mean it may take up to 15 days, whereas sometimes rollouts are much quicker, but a gradual rollout may take a little bit longer. So the gradual rollout for rapid release for this one is starting on April the 17th. For scheduled release, the gradual rollout is starting on May the 5th. For this feature on mobile, rapid release and scheduled release, the gradual rollout is starting on May the 1st. And also, this update is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers. However, this is not available to users with a personal Google account, which makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, that does make sense. And so, yeah, we actually have talked previously about how Google Chat isn't so relevant, or in our opinion, isn't so relevant for personal customers. But we're going to see an update a little bit later that maybe contends that with some of the new features that are available or coming across to Google Chat, where it might become a bit more relevant to personal customers, but certainly understand why this particular update isn't. It's also a little bit unusual to see these updates that are happening a little bit in the future. I mean, often when we talk about these updates, the actual deployment date has either already just passed or is coming up very soon, but this is actually certainly for mobile looking at May. So what have we got next, please, Adam?
Next up, Access approvals. So fine-tune access to data with additional options for access approvals. So in 2022, Google introduced access approvals, which enables customers to control when Google support personnel can access specific data during support and general maintenance. Beginning now, Google is introducing additional options that provide customers even more control over these data interactions. And they are there's the option to specify. So Google support personnel can indicate which specific products data they need access to. For example, Gmail data only instead of all of Google Workspace data. Access duration, so you can specify a time limit wherein data can be accessed. Control, so you can revoke previously granted access if no longer applicable. And also context, so you can denote the reason an access request was approved or denied, or why a previously approved request was revoked, to streamline the process for future requests.
I can completely understand why Google have done this, because kind of like in the previous updates, we talked quite a lot about that client-side encryption and features that have come through, and this is sort of a similar thing where Google is showing how you as a customer can control access to your data even from Google themselves. I think this is a good update. I think that it's good that they're introducing a feature of this approved access. What I would like to see is the option. This is very kind of customized, and you have to sort of go to a specific place to set up these access approvals and various things like that. What I would quite like to see is a simplification of this for Google support. So if I was doing this for a education customer that was concerned about this access, for example, what I would like to be able to do is go to one place, like say the access approvals area, and I would like to say, turn off all access to Google, to this workspace. So Google support can't get into anything on this workspace. And then when you do phone up Google support and you need them to do something, they would initiate something their end that asks permission
that says,
for that request.
I need access to this one folder or this one area of data to help with your specific issue. Do you approve or decline that?
Exactly. Kind of like in a basic sense of when you do a remote desktop request with a client and you say, I need to get onto your desktop. You do a remote desktop request, and at that point, depending on the remote desktop software, it might say, do you want to enable screen sharing? Do you want to enable keyboard control? Do you want to enable mouse control, etc., microphone, things like that. So I would kind of like to see this update evolve in that way a little bit, so that it wasn't so heavy on the customer having to go in and take all of the access away and then kind of control in their own way what Google support can access and can't access. It would be a little bit better if it was flipped around a bit more, so that you could shut everything off by default, and then when Google needed access, they would ask you for permission to access at that point. The only caveat to that, and the only reason that I can think that Google haven't done it that way, is because possibly Google need to go into our workspace consoles a little bit more than when we just directly ask for support. Maybe they go in there to do some kind of maintenance or some kind of checking. I don't know. I doubt it, because of Google's kind of privacy considerations and the rules and things like that. But that's the only thing that I can think of as to why they might not be able to do that.
Or maybe if you need some help with something, so if you just say, this one feature is not working correctly, Google may not actually be able to see from their end initially what you do or do not have set up, so then they would not know what they actually need access to in the first place to rectify whatever the situation is. However, I can also imagine it would be all too easy for somebody to just say, just have full access, because then Google will then have full reign, and it would almost certainly be a lot easier for Google to then resolve whatever they need to do, because they just have access everywhere. So there definitely is a balance that would need to be found, because you only want to give access to Google to what they need access to, but equally you may not actually know what Google needs access to in order to fix the issue, because maybe it's just a bit more complex or a bit more widespread than your own knowledge at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Adam. So, yeah, well, let's see how Google sort of evolved this. But it's certainly good that those controls exist, full stop, because they didn't before. So I think there's a bit here about why it's important. Again, I think we've kind of covered that a little bit, but I'll let you sort of read what Google have said.
So Google knows it's essential that their customers have visibility and control over their systems and data and how they're accessed by any third party, including Google. Introducing additional controls for their customers helps ensure that their data is accessed in an explicitly consensual manner that best suits the needs of their business. You can also read more about the sovereign controls for Google Workspace, client-side encryption, data regions, and access management capabilities in our document that I've linked, because I've added some links into that, for more information on how Google provides their customers solutions to reach their digital sovereignty goals.
Yeah, it is important, obviously, that sovereignty sort of aspect, because it does vary from country to country. So, yeah, that's very important. We've talked a lot about that on the client side encryption updates that have happened in the past. So how do people get started with this?
Okay, so for the admins, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about access approvals, access management, and access transparency. And I've added links to all of that within our document.
Great. And what's the rollout and availability here?
So rapid release and scheduled release. So there's an extended rollout which started on April the 11th. The availability access approvals is part of Google Workspace Assured Controls, which is available as an add-on for Google Workspace Enterprise Plus customers only. And for more information on that, you can contact your Google account representative. So this is an add-on, but only for Google Enterprise Plus customers.
Personally, I'm a little bit disappointed to see that with Google sort of doing that, making that so restrictive. I would have liked to have seen Google open that up to a lot more, well, virtually every version, to be totally honest, especially education. I'm very surprised that they haven't included... We've seen updates in the past where, for business, they've kind of gone, oh, this is enterprise level or enterprise plus level only. But then they've included education. They've included all of the education tiers because they know that it's an important aspect in education, particularly around data protection. So I'm a little bit disappointed that Google has only put that at the very, very highest level there, and it's an add-on as well. Maybe we'll see in future updates that start to trickle through. Maybe we'll see that start to come through to other versions.
Yeah, I completely agree. Everyone's data is just as important as everyone else's data, so you really would have... Yeah. Well, I definitely would have thought that this would be available to everyone, even users with a personal Google account, because their personal data is still their personal data. But yeah, either way, so at the moment, this is only for Enterprise Plus customers.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next, we have a Google Sites update. So, introducing new collaboration and flexibility features for Google Sites. So, last year, Google made numerous improvements to Google Sites, including the addition of a spacer option, a density theme setting, a stylized social media links. Now, Google is announcing even more enhancements that improve upon collaboration within sites and gives you even more control over the layout of your site's content. New collaborators' cursors will appear when site editors are typing within a text tile. This will help you and others know who is working on what while in edit mode of a site. You can also display your content with more flexibility by adding page frames and adjusting your site width for desktop viewing within custom themes. Page frame colours are customizable and width options include normal, full and wide. Lastly, Google is adding alignment options to buttons, allowing you to align buttons left, centre or right within a group. Aligned buttons shrink to fit their text, allowing a button to be narrower than the group containing it.
Some very nice little updates there for anybody using Google Sites, and there's some lovely little videos here showing what those actually look like, especially the width settings and things like that. Very useful to see the little moving graphics that you've kindly put on the document there, Adam. And interesting to see the update where you can see the other person working on the site as well. Again, I kind of was slightly ignorant because I just don't use Google Sites. I kind of assumed that was there already because they've got it on Google Docs, Sheets, Slides and all the rest of it. But very nice to see that that's come through. I'm sure it'll be very useful for people who are working in a little team and collaborating on anything in Google Sites.
For that feature, I'm not too sure if that is quite how I envisioned it, because it does say that collaborators' cursors will appear when site editors are typing within a text tile. However, on the example graphic that I've put in the document, you cannot see two different cursors. So instead you can see where one person is typing, and obviously you can see your own cursor. So that's very similar to how it is within Google Docs if more than one person has a Google document open at the same time. But because it said you can see two different cursors, I thought you can literally see, oh, this person is now clicking over here and this person's now going over here, in a bit like a remote desktop kind of situation. But it also said this is limited to within the text tile. So I don't think it's quite as elaborate as it sounds, but within a text tile, it should be clearer if two people are editing some text at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's very similar to what you see in Google Docs and things like that, where you can see the other person highlighting the text and things. But you're quite right, because Google said cursor, it does make it indicate that possibly you can actually see their cursor moving around. But I think you're right, it's just when they're sort of highlighting the text. How do people get started with this, then?
Okay, so for the admins, there's no admin control for this feature, but for the end users, collaborators' cursors will appear automatically in site edit mode. To adjust the width of a site or add a page frame, you can navigate to themes, then custom, edit, spacing, width, add or show page frame. To align a button, navigate to the insert menu and insert a button. You can then drag and drop a button to the appropriate section in the site and choose the alignment option that best works for your site. So that'd be very similar to if you were just changing the alignment in Google Docs or anywhere else in Google Workspace, really.
Yeah, and there's a lovely graphic showing that as well, isn't there? Great, okay. And I think we've got multiple kind of rollout phases here depending on the feature. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. These all seem to be a bit staggered, potentially, depending on who's working in Google's office that day, maybe. So for the collaborators cursor, rapid release, that feature is available right now. For the scheduled release, full rollout, so 1 to 3 days, starting on April the 24th. For the page frame and customizable site width, rapid release, there's a gradual rollout started on April the 11th. Scheduled release, there's full rollout starting on April the 25th. For the button alignment, rapid release, there's a gradual rollout that started on April the 10th, and scheduled release, there's a full rollout starting on April the 24th.
Great. And who's this going to be available for?
So this is available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers, and this is also available to users with a personal Google account.
Lovely. So right across the board, that's brilliant. And what have we got next, Adam? I think this is we haven't seen one of these updates for quite a while, have we?
That's right. Up next, we have a Google Classroom update. So practice sets in Google Classroom are now generally available. So last year, Google announced a beta for a new tool in Google Classroom called Practice Sets. Educators can transform new and existing content into engaging and interactive assignments. With auto-grading built in, teachers can receive performance insights and snapshots into students' progress. Students get real-time feedback as they complete practice sets, so they know whether they're on the right track. If they get stuck and need support, they can see automated hints and video suggestions, which are selected based on a learning skill added by the teacher. Google is very excited to announce that practice sets are now generally available in English in Google Classroom to Google Workspace for Education Plus and Google Workspace for Education, Teaching and Learning customers. I've also added a chip to a YouTube video that gives you a quick overview of using these practice sets as well. So while every student learns in their own way, practice and specific feedback can help them learn more effectively. Assignments can be completed with a variety of tools for input, such as a mouse, stylus, touchpad, or maths keyboard, depending on how a student works best. With practice sets, educators can more easily get insight into which concepts need more instruction time and when to move on, giving them performance trends and insights to shape future lesson plans. You can also visit the Teacher Centre to learn more about practice sets via Google's online course, and I've added a link to that into the document as well. A key part of teacher workflow is sharing their content. Now, teachers can share practice sets with verified teachers in their Google Workspace and leverage one another's curriculum with their own students. You can also speak to your admin to become a verified teacher.
Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, so there's quite a lot to unpack here. So, first of all, we're talking about something, we're not necessarily talking about a new feature here, we're just talking about a feature that's been announced previously, has been in beta a while, and is now moving to the mainstream, which is practice sets. Now, Google have talked about practice sets before, and we haven't actually really gotten around to using them much with our clients at the moment, but I'm definitely going to be speaking to one of our Education Plus customers about using this, because the automated hints and video suggestions along the way, I think, is absolutely wonderful. I remember somebody talking about video tuition before, and I'm a big fan of video tuition. I really like it. I consume it myself, and I produce a lot of it for you guys, you know, internally, and for our clients as well. Now, I don't force it on anyone. I do, as Google says here, everybody does learn in their own way. But the nice thing with a video is you can rewind the person as many times as you like and they're not going to get annoyed. And that is such a key difference, I think, between one-on-one tuition with somebody and, say, watching a video. Because watching a video, you can just go over those things that you don't quite get without feeling any embarrassment or without feeling any burden put on the other person. And I think that's so important for students. I think there's such a sort of a thing in the classroom or one-to-one tuition where I'm sure any teacher listening will understand that aspect of some students just feel that they have to say, yeah, I get it, when they kind of don't. And obviously good teachers can pick up on that or know when that's not quite the case or identify that down the line. But this just takes burden off of the teachers a bit, and it also possibly gives a nicer environment for the students to seek that help.
Yes, absolutely. I also love that this includes some live feedback or suggestions of help if needed. So, for example, if you are doing like a maths quiz or something to do with science or something like that, and if one of the students doesn't get the answer correct first time, then it will straight away give them some assistance, so they don't actually need to directly go back to their teacher, and then to learn that they got it wrong or something like that. It will actually give them real, essentially live feedback, which is really good. Within Google Classroom, we'll just set some quizzes or something like that. However, with a quiz or a test or whatever format the teacher decides to use, that would kind of be a bit black and white to say that you got it right or you got it wrong. Whereas with this, it will not give, because it's a practice set, so there's no pressure of it's a test, and so there's no stress that's added around it. Plus, there's the additional feedback. So I think this is a really good feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you about taking the pressure off a bit. And that's what I mean about it kind of takes it off from both sides. It takes pressure off the student a bit and takes pressure off the teacher a bit. Potentially. It's not necessarily going to work in every scenario. I think the other really exciting thing about this that is in this update is the insights as well. Because if you give a student a worksheet and they go home and they do it like a physical worksheet or physical work in their book, which I hasten to add, there'll always be a place for. I'm not, an advocate of getting rid of that and going completely over to technology. I think it's brilliant and a good thing that students still use pen and paper. I'm not an advocate for getting rid of that completely. But one of the downsides of that is you never really know how long it took a student to do a particular question, and that might give you insight as to where they're getting stuck or where they're having a bit of a problem. So I think those insights around how long they're taking on each part, or where they may be struggling, or where they've I mean, I haven't seen these insights, so I don't know how much detail they go into, but I think that would give
one example. Sorry to interrupt. One of the features within the insights, so every time a student answers a question, it will show you every single attempted answer that they gave you. So if it was a maths equation, for example, then they could say, oh, well, they did this wrong, and then the practice set kind of gave some suggested feedback, and then they answered the question this way. So then maybe they would, so you could see maybe they used a different formula or something along those lines. So every attempted answer is actually documented. So the student wouldn't see all of that. That's what the teacher can see. So then the teacher can really work out the logic that the student was using in order to come up with the answer that they came up with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or lack of logic in some cases, I imagine. Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, this is great, and I think possibly some teachers listening, or some people in education might be listening and thinking to themselves, well, it's great as long as you've got the time to set it up, and as long as you've got the time to look at the insights and things like that. I completely agree. Having worked in education a very long time and worked with a lot of teachers and educators, and running a business myself as well, you know, I know a lot about time management and effective time management. And what I can see in schools sometimes is schools can sometimes get themselves into, or educators can sometimes get themselves into a little bit of a vicious cycle when it comes to time, because you constantly feel like you're firefighting, and therefore you've not got the time to do these longer term sort of strategic lesson plans, for example, or anything like that. Now, I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but what I would say is, from my own experience of running a business, the time that you spend doing those more strategic things to work smarter, if we want to put a label on this, to work smarter rather than harder, I can guarantee you
you'll save in the future.
It will pay dividends. You will save in the future, Adam. You're absolutely right. It will pay dividends down the line, and it will help you to become more efficient in your own work life. It will help you with your work-life balance. It will help you with your well-being. It will help you overall, and ultimately help you teach your students. So I'm not trying to be too preachy with sort of giving out advice in that regard. I'm just trying to help anybody who's maybe new to teaching or starting out, of what I've seen personally and what I've experienced from being a business owner for a long time, as to it will pay dividends down the line, putting that streamlining in process in place.
So the other thing that I love about this feature is the option to share your content with other teachers. Because at the moment within Google Classroom, I believe if you're a teacher within Google Classroom, you can access the previous content from previous classrooms that you were in. But if you were not in that previous classroom, maybe you change year groups, or you cannot access a previous Google Classroom's content unless you're within that classroom. And I know one of our customers, for example, so during lockdown, they set up I think it was like 40 days worth of, there was a bundle of material for each day. So potentially during lockdown, or if a student is working from home from that day, then they can easily, they have a package ready to send out. However, only certain staff actually have access to that, because it would depend on which Google Classroom they were in the following year. So then they almost got into a habit of, before they archive each Google Classroom, let's add all in the teachers that are going to be within that same year group but for the next year. And so this would completely eliminate the need for that if you can just say, let's just allow all year 4 teachers to have access to all of the year 4 practice sets, for example. Then I think that would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Adam. And I'm not sure, but I wonder if this feature goes even beyond that, because I wonder if you can have practice sets as a verified teacher and share them across schools. share them kind of in a public database almost across. And I'm not saying
that
it
could be
can.
very helpful.
I'm not saying it can do that, but it would be. We need to probably look a bit more into exactly what Google's plans are with this verified teachers. And it leads me on very nicely as well. As Adam said there, speak to your there's a line here about speak to your admin to become a verified teacher. Absolutely, if anybody's listening and they're at school and they've got a IT support structure in place and they've got an admin in place, by all means go and speak to your admin about that. If you get at all stuck and if you need some help becoming a verified teacher, you can always contact us. So you can contact us, info@strawberry7.com. We're always happy to speak to anybody. Our phone number is in our video description as well, and we'll give you a hand becoming a verified teacher.
Lovely. Also, just finally, just to clarify, not suggesting that all teachers just reuse the exact same content every single year, but I know it is very common to use the previous year's content, at least as a template or as a stepping stone for what they're going to be doing the next year. So in that context, it is very helpful to be able to access the previous content, or also just to be able to see what the students did or didn't complete that year. Anyway, so to get started with this, so for the admins, practice sets are enabled by default, but admins need to add teachers to the verified teacher group in order for them to receive a shared practice set from other teachers in their Google Workspace. They don't actually specify how you would then access a shared set. So we may need to look into that just to clarify that. But for the end users, to access practice sets...
Oh, there you go, Adam. We found an answer really quickly.
To access practice sets, go to Google Classroom, then practice sets, then create. You can also visit the Help Centre to learn more about practice sets, and I've added a link for that into our document as well. So the rollout for this this feature is available right now, which is great. This is going to be available to Google Workspace for Education Plus and Google Workspace for Education Teaching and Learning Upgrade. So this is not available to Education Standard or Education Fundamentals. So I was hoping that this would be available to all education, because this is a Google Classroom update. Obviously, it's a very much Google Education based update, so it's not available to users with a personal account or business, etc. But it does only seem to be available to Education Plus and Google Workspace for Education, Teaching and Learning Upgrade.
Yeah, I do understand why Google have done that, because they did that before when it was in beta as well, because I think Google have made this very much a paid tier extra. Obviously Google have to strike a bit of a balancing act, right, between supporting schools and actually not giving away too much, and I do know that they made this
they know this is going to be a very popular feature, so stick it at a tier above.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is, I understand why they've done that. Lovely. So sorry listeners, sorry we've gone on about that update for quite a long time, but it's been a long time since we've had a Google Classroom update, and our main customers are Google Education customers, so Adam and I just wanted to sort of go into that a little bit for you, but hopefully you found that quite useful. What have we got next there, Adam?
Okay, next up we have a Google Drive update. Streamlined file organization with the new Google Drive location picker. So Google is introducing improvements to the web Google Drive location picker that enable you to quickly and efficiently select a location to organize files and folders. The update includes a new visual experience and helpful suggestions when moving files and folders to adding shortcuts to items in Drive. Specifically, you'll notice suggested start and all location tabs. Upon navigating into a folder location, the tabs are replaced by a back button and the name of the location. Details for the selected folder paths, which is an option to create a new folder, and an image notification if you're moving something into an empty folder. Suggested locations and the option to reject the suggestion, which immediately removes it from the list. That's quite handy. Streamlined navigation that adds an inline button to complete the action of moving a file in one click, and a label if a folder is view only, and explanations for why you might face an error when moving a file, such as not being the owner of the file. So essentially, if you're going to move a file or a folder from within Google Drive, they've changed the interface a little bit just to update it, and we like it. Looks good.
Yeah, I think this looks great. I think this is something that's been required for quite a while, because until this update, it was a bit of a nightmare when you'd move stuff and you couldn't even access starred locations, for example. So you'd have to work your way all the way back to, say, my shared drives, and then go through your shared drive and go through the entire folder tree. I think it's a really nice update, this. Very, very useful. And it's good to see some suggestions in there that you can then, like you said, reject, which is very, very nice. The graphic shows this really, really nicely on the document as well, so I'm looking forward to this coming through. I think there's a bit about here but why it's important, but I think we've really covered that. I think we can all work out why it's important. It's going to make it quicker for you to be able to move things around.
It makes it easier. There you go.
Exactly. Done. The rollout, what's the rollout pace on here and availability?
Okay, so for rapid release, there's a gradual rollout, which started on April the 12th. For scheduled release, there's a gradual rollout, which is starting on April the 26th. This is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers, as well as users with a personal Google account. So everyone that has access to Google Drive, this update is for you.
Fantastic. I really can't wait to see that on our own domain, so I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
So up next, there's another Google Chat update. So new community features for Google Chat, and also an update on Currents. So anybody that's not familiar, Currents is essentially the predecessor to Google Chat and Spaces. So last year, Google announced plans to wind down Currents to focus efforts on community experiences that are better integrated with the rest of Google Workspace. To help customers manage this transition, Google has published detailed guidance for workspace administrators and enabled customers to opt in for automated migration of Currents data to Spaces in Google Chat. I've added various links across this document, so highly recommend everyone have a look at this document, because it has some very helpful links in there. Google are nearing the end of this transition. Beginning on July the 5th, Currents will no longer be available. Workspace administrators can export Currents data using Takeout before August the 8th. Beginning on August the 8th, Currents data will no longer be available to download. Although Google is saying goodbye to Currents, they continue to invest in new features for Google Chat, so teams can connect and collaborate with a shared sense of belonging. Over the last year, Google has delivered features designed to support community engagement at scale, and will continue to deliver more.
Lovely. That's very nice, Adam, and thank you for that explanation of what Currents used to be for anybody who's unfamiliar there. Now, we've got a picture in the document here. What Google's done is, I suppose for the benefit of anybody who's kind of been existing exclusively in the world of Currents and not in Google Chat, Google has just given some rundowns of their latest updates. So we're going to go through these fairly quickly because we've talked about them on our previous podcast, but we just thought it was a good idea to go through them for our listeners, just to serve as sort of headlines of some of the recent updates that we've seen. So there's a nice graphic here showing them in more detail, but Adam's going to run through some of the main ones for you now.
Okay, so some of the highlights. So this month, Google enabled new ways for organizations to share information across their enterprise with announcements in Google Chat. This gives admin controls to limit permissions for posting in a space, while enabling all members to read and react, helping ensure that important updates stay visible and relevant. I do want to add in very, very quickly, so in the graphic that Google have provided for this, they posted something and lots of people have reacted to that. Because I'm very sad, I added that up. 4,192 people reacted to what Google have said, so they must have a massive organisation if that many people are actually reacting to something. But
Oh, well,
anyway.
as we've already discussed, Adam, Google seem to have it in their head that a typical organisation has about 20,000 employees in it. So you and I probably know better. But yeah, Google. This is one thing I find with Google is they can be a bit pie in the sky about how big they think companies are in the well, certainly in the UK. We were actually Adam and I were talking about this before we went on the podcast, and 95% of companies in the UK have less than 9 employees or less than 10 employees. So yeah, they are. Most companies are not that sort of scale, but it's nice. It makes a nice graphic, Adam. There are plenty of lovely emojis on here. Some of the reactions on the emojis are just bizarre. Like they're talking about a new announcement.
There's a llama.
Somebody's reacted with a donut. Somebody's reacted with a sunflower. I don't know what that reaction means, but there we go. I'm sure it makes sense to somebody. Yeah, sorry, I'll let you carry on, Adam. Thank you.
Google has already rolled out new ways to make conversations more expressive and engaging, such as inline threading to enable rich exploration of a specific topic without overtaking the main conversation, and custom emojis to enable fun, personal expression. Google has also made it easier for individuals to discover and join communities of shared interest. By searching in Gmail, users can explore a directory of available spaces covering topics of personal or professional interest, such as gardening, pets, career development, fitness, cultural identity, and more, with the ability to invite others via a link. So, Adam mentioned right at the beginning of this recording that previously we've kind of alluded, or we've suggested that Google Chat is probably not for personal users with a personal Google account. However, with that option to join other spaces or other communities within Space, then maybe that could be a reason for a personal user to be using it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Adam's included a link here on how to do it. So I'm quite interested to look at this myself, because we were talking about this before we started recording, weren't we, Adam? We were saying it was a little bit confusing that it says this is under a chat update. It talks about by searching in Gmail, which is obviously different, but then it says you can explore available spaces, which is Google Chat again. So we were a little bit confused about. Also, I don't know quite what it means by searching in Gmail. What like where? I don't know where you would search in Gmail. So I'm going to have a little look at this link myself in a bit more detail.
I just had a thought. I wonder although it says searching in Gmail, it's referring to the Gmail, did you call it the one pane view, where you can access everything from the Gmail interface or from the Gmail site. So although you could say you're technically on Gmail, you can still access chats and spaces from there. So I wonder if that's actually what it means.
I think you're absolutely right, Adam. I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's a little bit confusing that Google have put that in. Personally, I think they do mean pretty much within the world of chat, but like you say, you can access chat through Gmail. So yeah, I think that's what they mean. I mean, certainly from the graphic here, you seem to just go to Spaces, and then there's a section for browse spaces, and you can just type something in there. So I think it is actually quite straightforward to browse in there. Yeah, sorry, Adam, you carry on.
So, as communities grow, it's essential to provide tools for content moderation and data management. So last year, Google introduced Space Managers, a community lead with abilities to moderate conversations and manage membership. Google's partner community is extending the power of chat through integrations with essential third-party apps. The transition from Currents to Spaces in Google Chat removes a separate siloed destination and provides organizations with a modern enterprise-grade experience that reflects how the world is working today. Google Workspace customers use Google Chat to communicate about projects, share organizational updates, and build community. So it's more of just a bit of an update, almost as a summary as to what Google Chat is, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's quite right. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about, which I think you're going to recap here on some of the deadlines, haven't we, about moving from Currents. So yeah, if you are an admin who has customers on Currents, or you're moving from Currents, this is going to be very relevant.
Okay, so we have some recommended action from Google. So if you're an admin, you can review the change management guide, and I've added a link in our document for that. You can also use Takeout to explore your organization's current data before August the 8th. So if you are using currents, then I would highly recommend that you do at least have a look, see what data is there, because after August the 8th, it looks like that is no longer going to be available. So check that out, even if it's just to say, oh yes, there's nothing there that we do need to keep for your own peace of mind. It will be I would recommend doing that if currents is something that you have ever used. For the end users, you could read more about how to get started using Spaces in Google Chat, and once again, I've added a link in our document for that. This particular update, I guess, is going to be available to Spaces in Google Chat are available to all Google Workspace customers and users with a personal Google account.
Perfect. Yeah. But a little bit of an odd update, that one, because it's sort of an update, but also incorporated loads of other
it's
updates.
almost more of a notification. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but hopefully that was quite useful to people to hear that. Okay, what have we got next, Adam?
Okay, next up we have another Google Drive update. So set default label values for files in Google Drive. So currently admins can create, publish and utilize Google Drive labels to apply file level classifications. This helps users organize, find and comply with company policies as it relates to Drive items. This week, Google is expanding the automated classification capabilities of Drive labels to support setting default label values, in addition to the current admin ability to apply labels by default. With automated classification, label admins can construct rules that add labels when files are created or when file ownership is transferred. This update helps organizations ensure critical labels are applied at file creation. Using labels can serve as a condition for enforcing certain policies, such as data loss prevention. With default field values, admins can now be more specific with their label configuration. In addition, this provides more flexibility with policy controls while creating a default policy standard within an organization.
Great, thank you, Adam. So we were talking about this before, and Adam and I were kind of unpacking this update. To try and make this as easy as possible for listeners, if you've already understood, then brilliant. You're cleverer than
Gold
me.
star.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing here because Google are talking about setting default label values as opposed to ability to apply labels by default. And you might be thinking, what on earth are they talking about? We think that what Google are talking about here, we've actually mentioned this update in a previous podcast. We talked a bit more about when this feature sort of started to appear. So we believe that what this feature in its current form is that you as an admin can specify labels that your users can apply to certain files, and you can specify a default list of those labels, and you can give those to your users. That's certainly what the previous update was when it was talking about this. The change is, or rather this update, is saying that as well as that, the new ability that you're going to have is that you as an admin can specify conditions as to when labels are applied. As the example I gave here, when file ownership is transferred. So as an admin, you can go in, you can set like a rule that says when this happens to a file, apply this label. Automatically, exactly, and that is our understanding of the difference between this between these two updates. So I think we've got that right, and I personally think that this is extremely useful as an admin to be able to apply these labels. Adam and I were talking before, and we're not too sure why Google didn't just call it tags, because that would be a much more useful sort of term and a much more understood term. But sometimes these tech companies like to do their own thing, and so they've called it labels, but we essentially thought it's pretty much similar to tags, applying tags to something. And I can imagine that this would be very, very useful for admins in certain situations where they've got large scales of data and they want to apply rules around those labels that get applied to that data when certain things happen, file ownership transfer, moving of the file, for example, and various things like that. So I think it's a really useful update that's come through in certain circumstances. I think you've got some information about getting started here, haven't you, Adam?
Yes, so for the admins, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about applying classification labels to new files automatically. And again, I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but I've added a link in our documents that everybody can check out if they need a bit of assistance with that. For their end users, there is no end user setting for this feature.
Great, that makes sense. And when's the rollout pace, and what's the availability here?
Okay, so rapid release and scheduled release. There's a gradual rollout which started on April the 12th, and this is going to be available to Google Workspace Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Essentials, Enterprise Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Plus, and Education Standard customers, but it will not be available for other tiers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so it's quite a nice availability to see there for those labels. Lovely, thank you, Adam. Well, everybody will be very pleased to know that this is our last update, so you don't have to listen to my voice anymore, which is a blessing for everybody. So what's the last update that we've got here, Adam?
So finally from us this week, we have another Google Chat update. So Google Chat has been busy this week. So you can now communicate better with a modernized Google Chat. So following last year's announcement of a new look for Gmail and the recently refreshed interfaces for Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets and Google Slides, Google is also introducing a more consistent, enhanced look and feel for Google Chat. This update is based on Google's Material Design 3 and includes updated font, colors, layouts, panel sizing and more. Specifically, you'll notice changes to the top app bar, left navigation, main message view, compose setup, new topic button, and the thread panel within direct messages and spaces. Google hopes this modernized product experience increases collaboration and enables you to more easily complete tasks within your workflow. So essentially, if you've been on Google Drive recently and you've seen the new updated theme that was applied to Google Drive, Google's done the same for Google Chat.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. And it looks very nice in the graphic here. I really like. Yeah, I really like the update that they've done around Material Design 3. I think it's really modern, it's really slick. Certainly made it easier to see stuff. I think there's something much cleaner about it, and it's very, very nice.
Yeah, it's not a super dramatic change, but it's definitely it's just tidied it up a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it looks very, very nice from the graphic here. I don't think there's any kind of action on getting started here, is there? Because it's just a sort of graphic update, isn't it?
That's right. So no action is required by admins or end users. You'll automatically see these updates in your web experience over the next several weeks.
Oh, okay, lovely. So we're not hopefully going to have too long to wait to see those updates. And I think this is available across the board, isn't it, Adam?
Yes, that's right. So just to clarify, rapid release and scheduled release, there's a gradual rollout that started on April the 13th. So yeah, as I say, literally over the next couple of weeks, this should be applied to everybody. This is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers. And this is also available to users with a personal Google account.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Adam, and thank you for getting through all of that. There were some quite complex updates in there, so well done getting through all of that. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week. That's everything that you need to know about all of the updates happening around Google Workspace. I hope you enjoyed the show this week. Very, very long one. Well done if you stuck to the end. Remember that this podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider, and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
We'll be back again next Monday with more updates.
Goodbye.
Bye.